Clint Eastwood, the cinematic legend whose career spans over 6 decades, arrived on the set of The View with that trademark stoicism that had defined him both on-screen and off. Dressed in a crisp blazer and denim, his steel blue eyes scanned the audience with the unshakable calm of a man who had seen too much to be easily rattled. The crowd gave a respectful applause, not the screaming ovation that came with pop stars, but the kind of measured admiration reserved for a true icon. The panel of co-hosts greeted him with forced enthusiasm, aware that Eastwood's reputation preceded him not just as a towering actor-director, but as someone who didn't tolerate nonsense. He was there to promote his latest film, a quiet Western drama about honor, legacy, and moral decay in modern times. But from the second he sat down, there was a tension in the air. It wasn't just generational, it was ideological. And it wasn't long before one question sparked a chain reaction that ended with Clint Eastwood being asked to leave the show in real time, leaving behind stunned hosts, a silent crowd, and a storm brewing far beyond the studio walls. Asterisk, the interview started cordially. Whoopi Goldberg, herself a film veteran, welcomed Eastwood and complimented his latest work, noting how his storytelling remained grounded in grit and minimalism. Clint, never one for fluff, responded with a polite nod and a brief commentary on the value of restraint in modern cinema. Stuni Hostin asked about the challenges of directing in a digital age, to which Eastwood responded, "It's harder now to tell a quiet story. Everything's got to explode or shout. That's not art." The crowd gave a modest clap. Then Joy Behar leaned in, her tone friendly but loaded. "Clint," she began, "you've been called a relic of another time. Your films, your values, even your politics. Do you ever think maybe the world's moved on and left you behind?" The shift in energy was instant. The studio lights felt hotter. Clint Eastwood didn't flinch. He leaned back in his chair, narrowed his eyes ever so slightly, and answered in the same voice that once asked punks if they felt lucky. Asterisk. "The world moves on. Sure," he said. "But not every direction it moves in is progress. Sometimes it's just noise in a new costume." The audience gave a few claps, but Joy pressed forward. "But don't you think your brand of storytelling, your quiet men with guns and moral codes, is part of the problem? That kind of narrative doesn't leave room for nuance. It glorifies violence, patriarchy, even a kind of stoic suppression that some would call toxic." Clint chuckled, a dry, unimpressed laugh. "You can call it whatever you want. I call it accountability, taking responsibility, standing for something." Lissa Farah-Griffin tried to pivot, asking about his work mentoring young filmmakers, but the exchange had already lit a fuse that couldn't be undone. Asterisk. Joy leaned in again. "You once talked to an empty chair at the RNC, Clint. You think people forgot? A lot of folks think you're out of touch, living in a fantasy of America that never existed." Clint didn't answer immediately, stared at Joy for a beat, then said, "You talk a lot about representation and honesty. But it's funny how quickly you folks shut people down when they don't say what you want to hear." The silence that followed was heavy. Sunny looked at her note cards. Whoopi shifted in her seat. Joy, sensing the shift, pushed again. "So you don't think your films feed into conservative nostalgia? White male heroism? Anti-modern sentiment?" Clint took a breath and looked directly into the camera. "I tell stories about people who do the right thing when it's hard. That's controversial now? Maybe the culture's the problem, not the story." Asterisk. That was the moment the producers began to fidget behind the scenes. One of them whispered into Whoopi's earpiece. She tried to smooth the air. "Let's not turn this into politics. Clint's work speaks for itself." But the fire was already lit. Clint turned back to Joy. "You sit there every day passing judgment on people who don't talk like you, think like you, vote like you. And you call it justice, but it's just vanity, narcissism dressed up as activism." The studio audience gasped. Joy, visibly agitated now, snapped back. "We're here to challenge views, Clint, not endorse outdated ones." Clint didn't blink. "You don't challenge. You antagonize. You don't debate. You trap. You don't want dialogue. You want submission." At that point, someone off camera made a cut gesture. Asterisk. The show was meant to head to commercial, but Clint stood up before they could. Removing his mic slowly, He addressed the audience directly. "I came here to talk about storytelling, about integrity. But I guess there's no room for that here unless it fits the narrative." Joy muttered something under her breath. Clint turned to her one last time. "You want to know what's outdated, Joy? Pretending you're the voice of progress while bullying anyone who doesn't read from your script." And with that, he walked off. No slamming, no yelling, just a firm, final exit. The audience didn't know whether to clap or sit still. A few people applauded. A few shouted, "We love you, Clint." The camera scrambled, cutting to a pre-recorded segment. But the damage or impact was already done. Asterisk, by the time the show returned from break, Twitter was already ablaze. Hashtag Eastwood storms off, hashtag The View meltdown, and hashtag Clint vs. Joy were trending. Across social platforms, clips circulated faster than the producers could respond. Some hailed him as a fearless truth-teller, unafraid to speak to a culture that too often silenced men like him. Others accused him of refusing to adapt, of clinging to a world that no longer existed. Commentators on both sides had a field day. The moment wasn't just viral, it was cultural canon. And Clint Eastwood, once again, had managed to say more. By walking away than most ever did by staying seated. Asterisk, the next day's episode of The View opened with tension. Whoopi attempted to play it cool. "Well, yesterday got a little spicy," she said. Joy, trying to reclaim the upper hand, quipped, "Some people just can't handle a few questions." But even her tone felt hollow.
Also remarked,
"Sometimes we have to ask ourselves if we're truly open to hearing from everyone or just the people we already agree with." Sonny nodded but said nothing. No apology, no real reflection. Just deflection. It was clear that something irreversible had happened, not just between Clint and the show, but between the audience and the illusion of open dialogue. Asterisk. Eastwood's publicist released a brief statement later that day. Mr. Eastwood believes in honest conversation, not forced conformity. He stands by everything he said. No damage control, no media tours, just a calm reaffirmation. And in that quiet defiance, Eastwood once again demonstrated what had kept him relevant for over half a century. An unwavering refusal to bow to anyone's expectations but his own. He didn't need to tweet. He didn't need to perform. Silence was louder than any soundbite. Millions listened. Asterisk, meanwhile, fans flooded the internet with clips of his greatest roles. Walt from Gran Torino. It's the man with no name. Dirty Harry, all of them, staring down adversity with that same unshakable stare. In the age of manufactured outrage, Clint Eastwood had delivered a rare thing. Something unscripted, something raw, something real. And whether you loved him or loathed him, you couldn't deny the power of what you saw. A man pushed to his edge, not by rage, but by principle, and walking away not in defeat, but in absolute control. Asterisk.